Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stackelhaus, Fibromyalgia Coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with Fibro Fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast with Tami Stackelhaus, episode 36. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhaus, and happy Fibromyalgia Awareness Day. I have a very special episode planned for you today, but first just wanted to say Happy Awareness Day. For those of you who may not know why we celebrate on May 12th, it's actually because it's Florence Nightingale's birthday. When you go back and you read stories about Florence Nightingale and about the struggles that she had with her own health, it sounds an awful lot like fibromyalgia. Some people actually think that she may have had fibromyalgia. And so when we were choosing what day to celebrate on, her birthday was picked. So in case you didn't know, that's why we celebrate on May 12th, which is when this episode is releasing. So today's episode, as I said, is going to be a very special episode. I am recording this at the beginning of May, the week before it comes out. And earlier this week was actually my birthday. And one of the things that I did to celebrate was I invited all of my coaches, all of my clients, all of their clients to come to a special Zoom meeting, a special virtual birthday party where I had them all share their best tips and the things that have really helped them the most to improve their fibromyalgia and to feel better. I also asked them, for those who had worked with a coach, what it was like working with a coach. And I've taken all of that information from that group meeting, from that virtual birthday party, and I've combined it all to share with you today. I wanted as a way to celebrate Awareness Day. I really think awareness is great. We really do need people to be aware that fibromyalgia is a real illness that has, it's not just all in your head. There's real things going on in your body. And we also need advocacy. We need to change the way that funding is for finding new treatments and cures. We need to change some of the ways that fibromyalgia is treated in terms of being a disability for some people. So those things are important. But when I thought about what you would want most as a celebration of Fibromyalgia Awareness Day, isn't necessarily advocacy or awareness. What you want most, I am betting, is to feel better. So what I've done is taken all of this information to combine and to give you some tips and let you hear some stories from some people to maybe give you a little bit of encouragement and hope for ways that you can feel better. Before we get started, I have this week's listener shout out, and this one was sent to me on my Facebook account. It was a Facebook message I received, and I asked her if it would be okay if I read it to you because I just really enjoyed her whole message, and she said it would be okay. So this message is from Joan and Grace, which you will meet Grace shortly. This is what Joan sent me. She said, "Hi, Tami. Today has been a particularly painful day, and I have used multiple strategies to deal with it. Just now, I am resting on my bed with my 18-year-old cat, Grace, and I am snuggling her while I catch up on recent podcasts." She goes on to say, "My husband comes upstairs, and I tell him, 'We're listening to Tami. She just said that taking naps are okay when you're tired, so Grace likes her.'" She says Grace is arthritic and growls if you touch her arthritic hip, which is often the way I feel, although I usually refrain from growling. Grace spends a lot of her day napping on my bed, so we're nap buddies. She says, with the very next sentence, you suggested snuggling your cat. So I repeated that. And then you used the word Grace, which is her name. She says, I know this is goofy, but thought you would get a chuckle out of knowing you have both human and feline fans. Can't quite get that out, of knowing you have both human and feline fans. She says, seriously, I appreciate your books and podcasts. I find them very practically helpful, which is what I need. Stay safe and be well. Thanks from your friends in northeastern Kansas, Joan and Grace. Thank you so much for that, Joan. I already replied to you and told you what I thought about that, but I love that. My cats have always been a huge part of my self-care plan as well. So I completely get that. And I'm not sure, I might have actually growled when people made me hurt. So Grace, whatever kinds of lovin's that Grace likes, pat on the head, scratch under the chin, give her some love from me, and a virtual hug to you, Joan. Thank you so much. All right, so I combined all of the information from our call on Tuesday into a bunch of tips for you. And some of the things I'm actually just going to read and quote people because I think the way that they have worded things sometimes is helpful to hear their real stories, not just me tell you do this, do that, right? So this first comment is from Yadira. And even though you guys haven't met her on this podcast, she is super instrumental for helping get all of the goodies from the podcast to you. So Yadira is one of my trained coaches, but she's also my virtual assistant. She helps make all the pretty things that you see. So all the little quote cards. She helps with our social media, and she does a ton of stuff. Helps with the Fibromyalgia podcast website. So thanks to Yadira for all her help, and you guys give her an extra round of applause because a lot of what happens with the podcast would not happen without Yadira's help. So thanks, Yadira. And this is what she had to say when we were talking about her tips. She said that right now, and I love this, she said right now, with everything crazy that's happening in the world, she's really learned that managing her stress is key to keeping her symptoms under control. When things get extra stressful, that makes it really hard for her to manage her symptoms. And so with everything that's happening in the world right now, one of the things she did was designate her husband as the TV watcher for the family. So this is what she has to say. She said, I've been trying to manage my stress. It's one of the triggers where I feel it almost instantly. So during these crazy times, I am definitely staying away from the news. She says, I tell my husband, you're the designated TV watcher. You let me know if there's anything I need to know. And some of you probably can relate to what she's saying, especially with everything that's happening right now, in the middle of a global pandemic. It can be really stressful if you're watching the news a lot, reading the news a lot. So it can be helpful to designate somebody in your family that's not you to be the designated news watcher. I kind of do this in my house. My husband has always been interested, particularly in politics. So I kind of let him filter that for me rather than me getting caught up in all of the craziness and stress. It's just one of the ways that helps to manage my stress and therefore manage my energy. So you can think about designating somebody in your family as the person who pays attention to the news and just lets you know what you need to know. Yadira also talked about pacing, which is something that we talk a lot about on this show, particularly last episode where we talked about using a pedometer to manage your energy, right? That is a form of pacing. And so one of the things that she said she's had to learn since her husband is actually working more than he was before, because he works for one of the cities. She's doing more things at home. So she's had to pace herself more. She's had to really be conscious about what the cutoff time is and learning how to not let her perfectionist streak take over, right? So saying it's okay if things get done. It's okay if it's not perfect. I also asked her what some of the things are that she's been doing over the last couple of months to just kind of help manage things with all the chaos. She says, I've been going on walks around her house. She says, I've also walked inside my house. She said, I play music. I listen to worship music. It really helps to calm me down. I use essential oils, take long, long showers, and cuddle with my dogs. So, those are some of Yadira's tips, and you will hear some of these things repeated as we go along. So, and just to remind you, we'll have fun things on our website with some of these tips for you. We're also going to be sharing them on the podcast Facebook page and my Facebook page. So make sure you go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/ what is this episode? Podcast.com/36, episode 36. And we'll have the notes for today's call. Another person who was on the call and shared is Mickey. Mickey is one of our coaches, and she's in Argentina. She's fluent in both English and Spanish. So is Yadira, for that matter. And Mickey said, working with a coach really helped me because of the support and validation of how you feel, as well as the tips and suggestions your coach gives you. And then she said, there's this thing about being accountable to somebody that makes you move your ass and do it. You would probably just sort of say, oh yes, tomorrow. I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow comes and it never happens. But when you've committed to a goal and you're going to speak to someone about your goal in a week's time or whatever, it makes you do it and you're better off for it. She says, I also think it's a great first step towards learning how you feel, learning what your needs are. It means that you're asking for help, that you're moving into this self-love area where you start taking care of yourself. And she said, it's a great experience. She said, I know because that's what my coach did for me. Mickey also said that what she's using right now, very similar to what Yadira said, she's doing a lot of meditation, breathing, and mindfulness, really to help manage that stress with everything that's happening in the world right now, to help manage that so her symptoms don't get out of control. And I'll just say here too, if you are interested in exploring what it's like to work with a coach, just go to findafibrocoach.com, and that will actually give you all of the different options, including working with Mickey. All right. I also had two or three different people who mentioned that working with a functional medicine doctor was a huge piece of what turned things around for them. Julie said, her functional medicine doctor was amazing and really helped her because they test on so many different levels that regular doctors just don't test on. Melissa also said, she said, in July, I started seeing a functional medicine doctor. And as expensive as it is, it's been well worth every dime. In fact, I'm making sure that our flex spending is going to be well spent. And going to the functional medicine doctor was awesome because she was able to find out all of the stuff that I didn't have any idea was going wrong with me. For Melissa, that's actually been a huge part of her getting her energy back. So if you haven't And I talk about this in my books, but if you don't have a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath on your team, it can be really, really hard to make progress. It can be like treading water. You're kind of keeping up with where you are, but you're not necessarily getting better. So I really do believe, and this was true for me, having a doctor that was trained in functional medicine or working with a naturopath was really where I started making significant progress. There, you can go to functionalmedicine.org and actually look for practitioners in your area. This is also something we help our clients do, find good doctors near them. A naturopath, an ND, can also be really helpful. They're very similar types of training. The way they look at the body and the body's function and your lab results and things like that can be very similar. So if you haven't tried working with a doctor who is trained in functional medicine or a naturopath, I would suggest taking a look at that. I also had Jaira, who has been on the Fibromyalgia podcast. I did an interview a while back with Jaira about her daughter, Lexi. We actually talked about the way that fibromyalgia affects not just the patient, but the entire family, particularly when the person with fibromyalgia is your teenage daughter. If you're interested in hearing that episode, you can see that on episode 25. So fibromyalgiapodcast.com/25, and you can hear the full interview with Jaira. So she talked about, since it's her daughter that has fibromyalgia, we talked about the things that they did to help her daughter feel better. And a huge piece for them was CoQ10, coenzyme Q10. She said, we found a neurologist, he did a lot of blood work, and specifically at that time, he found that my daughter was low on CoQ10. He started her on pretty high doses, and it made a tremendous difference in her energy. I would say she had 50% more energy after starting on the CoQ10, which is fantastic. I know a lot of you really struggle with fatigue. And so CoQ10 can be something potentially to think about. I talk about this in my first book, in Take Back Your Life, and what to look for in a supplement to help your CoQ10. CoQ10 is actually one of the things that helps your body convert the food that you eat into energy that your body can use. So if you don't have enough CoQ10, that conversion isn't happening properly, and so you don't have enough energy. So it can be super important for some people. Jaira also said, and I'm going to read this to you because it is, I love how she says it. And so I want her mama heart to speak to you right now. And she's going to talk from the lens of a mama whose teenage daughter has fibromyalgia. But I want all of you to hear this. And because this is true, whether you're a teenager or a full-grown adult, this is still true. She says, I think it's important to remember that you're in a marathon. You're not in a sprint, you're in a marathon. So if it takes you some extra time to get through high school or extra time to get through college, fill in the blank for you, it's okay. You've got your whole life ahead of you, particularly if you're a teenager. You don't need to feel those time pressures that are put on us by society. You get your school done in 4 years, you go to college for 4 years, and then you're done. You start a career, you have babies. You really don't have to be on those timelines. This is also true, whether it's building your career, having kids, buying a house, whatever all those things are, expecting your body to be healed in a certain amount of time, right? We've got to get rid of this idea that there are deadlines. Your body's going to do what it's going to do. It's going to take how long it takes to heal. There are things that you can do to provide your body with the building blocks, to provide your body the time and the space to be able to heal, right? Like if you broke your leg, we can make sure that the bones have been set properly. We can put a cast on to make sure that we don't mess it up. We can make sure we're not walking on it, right? Give it rest, all of those kinds of things. And you do the same with your fibromyalgia, right? You make sure you're not overdoing things. You make sure that you're feeding your body the nutrients that it needs to be able to heal. Make sure you're getting enough protein, all the things, right? But the actual healing process, your body's going to do what your body's going to do, right? The better tools you give it, the better job and the quicker it can happen. But we still ultimately don't have control over how long that is. And so being able to let go of those expectations, to change those expectations, and really give yourself space and give yourself grace is super important. So I love what Jaira had to say about that, which actually goes right into what Kate had to say. She said that, she says, I don't know about everybody else, but I watch a lot of Disney flicks with the young ones in my life. And she said, my advice comes down to 2 Disney quotes: just keep swimming and let it go. So just keep swimming, of course, is from Finding Nemo. Dory, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep going. And that is so true. We totally underestimate how much we can accomplish if we just keep swimming, if we just keep going. So many people give up way too soon. They might try a supplement for a week or two when it takes longer, or they might try a new medication or a new therapy or pacing or getting better sleep or whatever it is that you try. Just don't try it long enough to really be able to see the difference. Also, like Jaira said, right? It's a marathon, right? This isn't a sprint. We're not looking for a magic bullet that's going to fix everything all of a sudden at once. We're looking at incremental changes that we can make over time to give you the best life possible. And so just keep swimming and then let it go. Let it go. There are things that you can fix. There are things that you have control of. There are things that you don't have control of, right? And trying to take responsibility for the things that you have no control of is just a recipe for frustration and extra stress and ultimately more symptoms, really. So that's Kate's advice. Just keep swimming and let it go. Let it go, of course, is from Frozen, if you aren't familiar. So Robin is also one of the coaches I've interviewed on the podcast. Robin talked about post-traumatic growth. And so if you're somebody who has experienced trauma and you are curious about that post-traumatic growth, I would encourage you to check out Robin's interview with me, which is episode 23. So you'll find that at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/23. And she talks a little bit about this in the interview, but for her, getting better sleep was the thing that really changed the game for her. And I'm gonna quote her from our call because you can really hear in how she describes this what a big deal this was for her. So she said, I had a terrible, 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 awful situation with insomnia. Nothing was helping. Nothing was working. She said, I was at my wit's end. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't meet the criteria for a sleep study or a CPAP machine. And it turned out it was my adrenals. My adrenals were just wiped out from years and years and years of stress. at that point is about when she took my training program. There was a particular supplement that I recommended that she try, and it totally changed the game for her. That plus getting a non-fibro pain injury dealt with reduced her pain levels and allowed her to get good sleep. And now she's doing much, much better and is coaching people as well. So those are the tips from the folks we had on the call. I'm actually just going to pull this up here super quick. I also got an email from one of my clients who couldn't be on the call, and I want to share some of Laura's tips as well. She said that for her, pacing, like Yadira was mentioning, pacing has been really important for her. Water exercise, myofascial release, self-care, psychotherapy, dealing with her thoughts and emotions and all of that kind of stuff. Medications, of course, have also been helpful, and coaching. I asked her, what's the number one thing that helped you get better? And she says, I wish there was just one. She says, but I think different things at different times. So maybe being flexible, being open and persistent was actually the number one thing that helped her. And I think that this is such a great thing to point out. It's so easy to feel like you've tried everything. It's so easy to not want to try something new because you've tried so many things that didn't work. Why should I try something new? But really, that being open, being flexible, being willing to learn and try new things, it takes a certain amount of courage, but that's also how you're going to get better, because if what you were doing worked, you'd be there by now, right? So we need to do some new things. We need to do some things differently. So having the courage to be open and to try new things, being willing to spend the money and the time and the effort and the brain power to do some new stuff can really be a huge benefit to helping you get better. I asked her if she had anything to say about her experience working with a coach, and she said working with a coach has been vital on many levels, for support, for fundamental information and education, for hope, and for structure, which I love because so easy. I mean, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's one of the ways that fibromyalgia coaching, what I teach, is different than most types of coaching, because we really are experts at fibromyalgia. And so there's so much information we can teach you, we can give you to help you share with your doctors to help you get better treatment. And like I said, you don't know what you don't know. This is information that's not being taught in medical schools, so your doctor doesn't know. So it can be super valuable and super helpful. She also said that for her, some self-management strategies have been really helpful, like her just learning how to manage herself, how to live her life, how to structure her life in a way that supports her feeling her best. She also wanted to mention a few books, which is great. And I'll include links to these books in the show notes for today's episode. So if you are looking for today's show notes, just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/36 and you'll find links to these books. So the 4 books she mentioned, one is my book, of course, which you can get a copy free at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. She also mentioned Dr. Ginevra Lipton's book, Figuring Out Fibromyalgia, which is actually her first book, and I'm not sure it's still in print. So I will actually, if it is, I'll include that link. Otherwise, as a replacement, I would recommend Dr. Lipton's second book, which is the Fibro Manual. Laura also mentions Freedom from Fibromyalgia by Nancy Selfridge, MD, and The Patient's Guide to Chronic Fatigue Syndrome and Fibromyalgia by Bruce Campbell, PhD. So, like I said, we'll have links to those books as well. I really do believe that educating yourself is critical. You have to advocate for yourself. You are the only person that knows what it's like to live in your body. And most importantly, doctors are not being taught this information in medical school. So if you're going to your doctor and expecting them to know what to do to help your fibromyalgia, they just don't. Most doctors, fibromyalgia is mentioned as a couple of sentences during another class in medical school, or they might have a 1-hour lecture on fibromyalgia. You can't teach everything about how to manage fibromyalgia and the way it manifests and what to do. If a patient doesn't respond to this, what else do? You just can't do that in an hour. My coaches have, I don't know, probably between 10 and 15 hours of education on fibromyalgia. So there's no way you can get it all in an hour. So it is important that you educate yourself so that you can help educate your doctors. And if you have a doctor who won't listen to you, then that could be a good reason to maybe start looking for a new doctor, and maybe try a functional medicine doctor or try a naturopath. So those are my tips for you on this Fibromyalgia Awareness Day. I'll give you, actually, I don't have mine on there. So I'll give you a couple, but of course, like this podcast and my books really are all of my tips for you guys. But if I ask myself those same 3 questions that I asked my coaches and clients, number 1, what are your best tips? And I would say from me to you, my number 1 best tip was actually last week's podcast episode. Learn how to use a pedometer or a step tracker to track your steps so that you can manage your energy better. That is so helpful. It's something that nobody ever teaches anywhere, and can be critical for helping you balance that. What is too much? Can I do more? Can I not do more? How do I not end up wiped out at the end of every day? So go take a look at that episode, episode 35. So fibromyalgiapodcast.com/35 for my favorite energy management tool in the name of the podcast episode, and learn how to manage your energy using a pedometer or a step tracker. That's my number 1 tip for you. The second question was, what is the number 1 thing that has helped you feel better? And for me, the answer to that is changing my relationship with my body, which is, granted, not an easy thing to do. I tell the story about how this happened in a couple of different podcast episodes. The first one is episode number 3. It's actually my personal fibromyalgia journey story. It's how fibromyalgia became my friend. You'll find that at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/3. And I also talk about it, and we talk more about this idea of changing your relationship with your body in an interview I did with my friend Janet. And that is episode 29. So fibromyalgiapodcast.com/29, and you'll hear my interview with Janet Farnsworth. And the thing about changing, the reason this was so important, I had a very adversarial relationship with my body. I was one of those kids who was always sick growing up. There was always something going on with me. There was always something to fix. So I really had this thought, this feeling that there was the real me, and I was stuck inside this body that just didn't work right. And because of that, I sort of treated my body with some contempt. It's kind of like the printer right here, next to me, where it's like, if it doesn't work, you're half tempted to just kind of bang on it a little bit and make it work. It's kind of the same kind of relationship I had with my body. So when I would have fibromyalgia symptoms, when I would be fatigued, it would just be like, oh, come on. And I would push through, right? Or, not take a nap because I shouldn't have to do that, or whatever the thing might be. And it was through my husband that I realized I was treating my body like my enemy. And so for me, changing that relationship, realizing that me and my body, we're on the same side. If there's an enemy here, it's fibromyalgia, and my body and I are fighting that together. That really changed things, because with me and my body on the same side, then it meant I was more apt to do things to take care of her. I was more apt to feed her good food, get enough sleep, not push too hard, all of those things. So changing that relationship with my body allowed me the foundation to be able to start doing all of the other things that I do that help me get better. And then the third question that I asked everybody was, if you worked with a coach, what was that like? What did it do for you? And I've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but I believe in coaching so much because it was a coach that changed my life. I was 2 years into a fibromyalgia diagnosis. I was lost, frustrated. I had this vision of my life all going downhill. And that's when I hired my first coach to help me with my health, with my fibromyalgia. And it was her brainstorming, her support, her encouragement that kept me going in those early years. She didn't know anything about fibromyalgia, but she was an awesome coach and helped me figure out my own answers for things, which was critical. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here helping you if it weren't for her. So yeah, having a coach was completely instrumental in changing things. I might almost even put that as the number one thing, because it was also working with her that helped me change my relationship with my body. So those are my answers to those three things. So I hope you guys have a great Fibromyalgia Awareness Day. It's one of those things kind of funny to celebrate, right? We all have this chronic illness that can be debilitating. But instead, I hope that today's episode gives you some encouragement, gives you some hope, gives you some perspective that maybe you can get better. Because these things that we're talking about here, they're not rare, they're not unique, they're not super secret and special. They're not even super expensive, most of them. They do cost, some of them do cost money, but we're not talking millions of dollars here. We might be talking hundreds if you want to go see a fibromyalgia specialist or functional medicine doctor or something like that. We might even be talking thousands, depending on what programs you are signing up for. Working with me would fall into that category. But we do have coaches that aren't that much. And we even have students and people who take scholarships. So there's a whole wide range of things for you here that it's totally possible for any of you to try these things. Maybe not try everything, but at least try some of them, right? So hopefully this gives you some hope, gives you some encouragement. I hope that you will come back next week. I am going to be interviewing one of my coaches. I'm going to be interviewing Julie Schiffman. She's actually in training right now. So if you are one of the people who signed up to potentially work with a student coach, Julie is one of the people that you would work with. And Julie has had fibromyalgia for over 20 years. She's raised kids. She's raised grandkids with fibromyalgia, with her having fibromyalgia. So she's got lots of tips for those of you who are stuck at home with your kids during this pandemic when your kids are not at school, and they usually are, and you're wondering how you can possibly do this with fibromyalgia. Julie's going to have a lot of tips for you. So I'm going to be interviewing her on our next episode, episode 37. So we'll see you back here in 2 weeks for that. The episode after that, episode 38, I'm interviewing my friend Liz, who's the founder of Recovery Love Box and the Chronic Love Box subscription. It is a subscription box service specifically for people with chronic illness from someone with chronic illness. So we talk about that in episode 38. And then episode 39, I have Dr. Sheila Whiteman coming to talk about how to stop those bladder leaks. Dr. Whiteman is the author of To Pee or Not to Pee. And I know a lot of my clients, a lot of you listening, have dealt with all kinds of different digestive issues. You may think that, leaking a little when you sneeze or cough is just part of getting older. But Dr. Whiteman is going to be here for episode 39 to tell you why that's not the case. And I'm also going to be sharing my experience from working with her. And then episode 40, that's going to be our next Ask the Coach. I haven't decided yet what the topic of that is going to be. So if you have something you want me to address, if there's questions you have, by all means, please send those in. Just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You'll see Ask the Coach in the menu and just send in your questions. All right, you guys, so I'm going to wrap it up for today. I hope you found a tip in there. Okay, so this is my coaching for you as I leave. A lot of times you'll listen to an episode like this or go to a class or read a book and you get lots of good information and then you close the book and you leave the class and it doesn't get implemented. So my challenge to you between now and our next episode, this is exactly what I do on a coaching call. It's so funny. I just immediately went into coaching mode there. What I want you to do between now and our next episode is pick one thing. You don't have to implement all of them. You may not even be able to implement all of them right now, right? Like you're probably not going to have an appointment with a functional medicine doctor right now when things aren't even open. So pick one thing. Pick one thing and try it between now and our next episode. And if you do that, I would love for you to just shoot me a message and let me know what you tried and how it went. And maybe you can be our listener shout out for the week. All right, you guys, have an awesome Awareness Day. Stay safe out there, stay healthy. And if there's anything I can do to help, you can reach me through fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Bye, guys. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. If you're ready to see if working with a fibromyalgia coach can help you feel better faster, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com, where you can schedule a complimentary consultation to explore your options. During this call, we'll discuss your fibromyalgia journey, what your needs and challenges are, and give you recommendations on how to reach your goals the quickest way possible. Thank you for tuning in today, and join us next time as we explore more ways to help you take back control of your life and health. My music and sound editing were done by Daniel Munkus at Subtle Soup Records. Podcast management and creative copy by Sonia Louise of Performance Podcasting.